whatever you practice, you reinforce. So the last thing you want to do is keep throwing yourself at that difficult passage with tight hands and expecting a different result. You're only teaching yourself, A, to be anxious about it, and B, to be uncoordinated.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Musician Podcast, where you'll learn how to practice more effectively and perform better under pressure with insights from expert musicians and the latest research in performance psychology.
You've been the principal flutist with the Boston Symphony now for, I think, almost 2 years, if I'm remembering correctly. And previously, you were principal flute in the Pittsburgh Symphony and have performed as guest principal with many other major orchestras and have had many, many high-profile performances as a soloist or in chamber music settings, all of which to say you've had a lot of success performing at a really high level under a lot of pressure. But I'm also kind of assuming that there must be at least some auditions or performances over the years that didn't necessarily go the way that you would have liked. And maybe you've even had some of those like really sort of almost traumatic days that stick with us and make us question ourselves even months or years later. I think a lot of times when we see musicians perform, we assume that they feel as confident on the inside as they appear to be on the outside. And sometimes there is that alignment between our inner and outer selves. But I wonder if this is something we could kind of start exploring, as in like, is it really the case that musicians who look and play confidently and courageously like really feel that? Or is it often possibly the case that musicians look more confident and play more confidently than they actually feel on the inside? And or even things like, is it possible to play well even if you're not feeling like 100% confident? Or do you have to be 100% confident to win a big job, et cetera, et cetera? But I wonder if we could just kind of play around with that topic a bit.
That's a great topic. And yeah, I 100% believe you can play really well even if you don't feel confident. And in fact, Dana Sinclair in her book Dialed In, she talks about it doesn't matter how you feel, it's what you do. I find that just tremendously empowering, because often, I mean, we almost never have the ideal circumstances. You're always going to feel nervous. You know, there's always going to be some feeling of discomfort, I would say, because to be a performer is just to be vulnerable. I think we can really equip ourselves, like philosophically, to deal with that, and so not get carried away by how we're feeling. So there's a lot of underpinning, I think, that goes into that. Like, you really have to have a strong philosophy about why you're doing this performance, or what you're wanting to convey, or what your relationship to the audience is, what your relationship to the jury is. I mean, to have kind of considered those things beforehand. And then it doesn't matter if you feel, I mean, confidence is really overrated. And I think something that I did recently when I had to do a solo performance with Boston was right before walking on stage, every time it was just choose courage, choose courage, choose courage, because I think that's much more important. It is like the choice you make rather than just how you feel. You're not at the mercy of events. You're not buffeted around by them. Sometimes you may feel more confident than others, but it really doesn't matter. And just having a really good game plan and good, like having your mental approach really thought out and crafted before, and just accepting your vulnerability and accepting that with kindness. And then to get back to the first part of your question, I was thinking about that this morning, actually. I thought I must tell Noah about some of the most disappointing things that happened to me were also, I mean, this sounds a bit twee, but they actually were catalysts for really developing your craft. And so I'm when I was younger, I was in the finals for the Royal Concerto by Principal Flute audition. And in that final round, none of my low Ds came out. And that had never happened to me before. And it was because the pressure of the situation, you know, it went right to my jaw. And so I was sort of really holding a lot of tightness and tension in my jaw. And, you know, for low Ds, you need the airstream to go at a certain angle, and my jaw was in the way. So that was really disappointing. And it was also confusing because it had never happened before. But it was also something that set me on a path of just, okay, well, that's going to happen now. You know that's going to happen. So what are you going to do about it? So I had already done quite a lot of Alexander technique before that. When I was a student, I practiced so hard. I was just very ambitious and driven, but also very anxious. And so the way I was practicing was just kind of random effort everywhere all the time, as opposed to poise, which is right effort in the right place at the right time. And so my left hand would go numb. So I ended up having Alexander technique lessons then, and it was incredibly helpful, and it really helped me understand how to practice constructively, like just take responsibility for the way you're organizing yourself physically, but also how you're organizing yourself mentally as well, because the shoulders don't get tight on their own. The fingers don't grasp the keys for dear life unless there's an element of fear there as well. I mean, it's psychophysical. And so it gave me a really wonderful framework for practicing well. But I think I'd never been in maybe quite such a high pressure situation as that final round. And I really wanted the job. There was another occasion that I was in the Rampal competition, the international flute competition in Paris. And the first round went really well. And people were so nice. They said, oh, what a beautiful sound, etc., etc. And then on the day of the second round, I couldn't find a bank that would exchange my traveler's checks. It was in the days of traveler's checks. And so I was in a panic. I was running around the streets of Paris trying to find, I wasn't staying in a very touristy area. So by the time I got to the competition, instead of having a spacious maybe 2-hour window to warm up nicely, I got there 15 minutes before I was due to play. And of course I kind of crashed and burned, and people were saying, what happened to your sound? And again, that's the psychophysical. Like, I was just holding so much anxiety there that I wasn't able to deliver what I was able to do. And so those are the two, I mean, there's been plenty of other rejections, but those are the two main ones that I really learned from, and they helped me in the future.
There are a couple things you've said already that I really wanted to dig a little deeper into, and I think they're interrelated. I mean, you had talked about needing to be vulnerable in performance or on stage, and before the Boston concerto performance, you had the mantra, choose courage, and you also talked about needing to equip ourselves for the pressure of the situation. The thing that I really wanted to kind of look at for now was this mantra of choose courage. I mean, I think on some intuitive level, we all probably have a sense of what that means, but it can also be kind of abstract. Is it possible to maybe share some examples, musically speaking perhaps, or in the piece itself, like what you might have meant by that to yourself?
Something I'm very interested in is the idea of playing generously, playing open-heartedly. When I think of the people I really look up to, like Yo-Yo Ma, Joyce DiDonato, and Sophie von Otter, there's a selflessness and an openness about the way they make music. I think the enemy is playing defensively in order not to go wrong, maybe slightly hiding your light because you don't want to be embarrassed, you don't want to let yourself down, you don't want people to reject you. And then, so I think there's a way of playing in order not to go wrong, which is not really making music. That's only like physical execution. There's no communication in that. And something I'm really interested in, and actually you're to blame for this, because I remember in one of your podcasts, you talked about on the door of a dance studio, the little notice, the only reason to practice technique is so the body doesn't get in the way of the soul expressing itself. So I think for me, like the whole point of practice and the whole point of mental preparation is to get rid of the obstacles that are in the way of the soul expressing itself. So if I'm going on stage feeling like I need to protect myself or defend myself against rejection, then I'm only going to play half of what I can do. And it's not going to reach anybody. The best that you can hope for with that is that somebody will admire you. Well done. You navigated that well. But it's not necessarily going to touch people or reach them on a human level. But at the same time, it's so, we are fragile. It is such a human thing to feel like, I want people to like it. And so I love this idea that choosing courage is sort of, in a way, I don't know, this sounds too harsh, but it's sort of getting over yourself, like taking the focus off yourself. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Less self-regard, less self-defense, and more commitment to the task at hand. So that's how I would define courage. So, yes, this could go wrong. Nevertheless, I've trained to the best of my ability. My job is to express whatever the characteristic of the music is that I'm playing. My job is to connect with people and to be connected with myself too, and connected with the composer, sort of empathetically to co-create with them. Yeah, this is frightening. Nevertheless, I've prepared as best I can, left no stone unturned, and the concert's going ahead. I just love that wisdom of no escape. It's such a reality check. The concert's going ahead. Choose. You have to choose. Are you going to play, or are you going to defend? Or are you going to participate fully in that exchange with the audience?
My impression is that this means allowing yourself, or maybe pushing yourself, to take risks in that moment where there's no guarantee if it's going to work out the way that you want or not. And what came to mind is, I think often of, like myself, even in master classes as a child, after I'd already played, the teacher would say, okay, let's work on some things. And then they'd ask me to do a part again, and it would already sound better. But then they'd ask me to do more of this or do less of that, or, kind of tease apart some of the details. And then I'd do a tiny bit more, maybe. But then they'd need to keep pushing me to do more and more still. And I think there's sometimes a technical element of that, because it's harder to do some of those things. But also even just not wanting to do too much of something and be ridiculous or feel silly or something. And I'm wondering if that's along the lines of what it means in that moment to choose courage.
I think I can define it a little bit more clearly, from a technical point of view. In a way, it's much easier to tighten up. It takes quite a lot of presence of mind. I refuse to do that. I refuse to get tied in knots physically, and to redirect yourself. So a lot of people, I think, have the misconception that Alexander techniques about relaxation. It's nothing to do with relaxation. It's to do with skill, to me, coordination and skill. And so you're not going to feel relaxed when you're walking into an audition or playing a difficult concert. So it's part of the choosing courage is how you respond to the stimulus. So, yeah, this is a high pressure occasion. I feel vulnerable. Nevertheless, in the face of that, you can choose. Free the neck. So even something as simple as freeing the neck, or if you have for flute players or violinists, if you've got a big shift, you might kind of, I hope I get the shift, and then brace to do it. Or for the flute players, flying up the opening scale of the Daphnis and Chloe solo, it's very, very tempting to grasp and brace there. But I think part of choosing courage is I refuse to do that. I will make a different choice. I will choose to keep the body peaceful. And so that's one way of maybe defining it a little bit more on a technical level. And then philosophically, I remember one Alexander teacher I had, it cracked me up. She said, Lorna, you have to allow all the possibilities to be on the table, including complete catastrophe. Because only then are you free to move. Rationally it could happen. And I actually find it really strangely comforting and empowering to just accept that fact, because we sort of brace against that so much. But actually it could happen. And then just choosing, nevertheless, I'm going to offer what I can offer. And release everybody from having to like it. They don't need to like it. In fact, it's unrealistic. I also find this very comforting. It's really unrealistic to think everybody's going to like everything you do. And we're often so afraid of that. But it's quite nice. It's quite nice to give the grace of to the audience. You don't have to like this. It would be nice if you did. Of course, everybody wants to feel appreciated. But it's also, like, just, rationally speaking, you can't please everybody. I saw this wonderful little saying recently in a shop window. You can't please everyone, you're not a pizza. But I just think that's helpful for us. And I have actually had to use that expression of allow all the possibilities to be on the table. I remember once in Pittsburgh playing the Badineri of Bach's Suite in B minor. And it's something I know inside out. I've played it from memory since I was like 14 or something like that. And the music was up in the dressing room. I was just waiting backstage to go on. And all of a sudden, I was pressing the wrong buttons. It's like, what note comes next? And there was no time to go and get the music. There was no time to do anything. So I just thought of this, allow all the possibilities to be on the table. And then it does allow you to play. I mean, that's a bit of an extreme example, but I do love that philosophy. There's so much in our business about judgment and about rejection or praise and blame, or humiliation or a lot of accolades. And it's hard to navigate. I mean, honestly, there have been times in my life when I've wanted to leave the profession altogether. Seriously, I did look at going in other directions at several times in my life. But I love music. So then it's a choice. And always remembering you have this choice. Like, nobody's making you go and take that audition. Nobody's making you do that solo thing. So I think it's really empowering just to own that choice. And then equip yourself the best you can on every level, in your preparation, in your practice, defining your coordination, in your mental preparation, and even your sort of philosophical outlook, your emotional response to what you're doing. And, it takes a while to figure it out. And I don't think we ever really do totally figure it out, but we can make our peace with these high-pressure situations. And learn to flourish in them, not just survive, but learn to thrive. I was so lucky with my teachers. My teacher, William Bennett, was so fearless and so uninhibited. And there's so much joy in the way he made music. And I try to emulate that, because as long as the breath is going this way, leaving the body, you're communicating. I asked him once, what goes through your head when you walk on stage? Because he immediately puts the audience at their ease. And you felt this warmth. And it was just enjoyable. And I always enjoyed hearing him play, and you were always moved by it. And he said something really interesting. He said, when I walk on stage, I try to, look at members of the audience, acknowledge them so that they can relax. I thought that was a really interesting thing to say. So they feel acknowledged and they can relax. And then he said, he wasn't a religious man, but he said, then I say a little prayer, I will do my best. And he would play. And so there was just that kind of beautiful humility and acceptance of the vulnerability, and really a clear sense of what your role is. I mean, so part of the taking care of tension or tightness is not just so that your low Ds come out in a final of an audition, but it's also so that your audience can relax, so the jury can relax, so they're not watching you struggle or strain, and then that creates this kind of sympathetic mirroring in them. It makes them anxious, if your shoulders are up around your ears.
The way that we initially kind of got into this subject, it might seem as though high pressure performances are this like battle almost between us and ourselves in a way. But as you were starting to allude to earlier, just a moment ago, that's not necessarily how it has to be. It's not always something that we experience in that sort of way. Performing can be the most magical, thrilling, engaging, inspiring experience for a musician to have. And so I wonder if you can speak to what those moments feel like, or maybe you've used the word or the phrase equip ourselves before, which makes me wonder a little bit, like, what is the process of doing that, in the practice room in advance, the nuts and bolts of that, but even the mental side of it, so that when we do go on stage, we do have a clear idea of what we want to say, and what that might mean or look like. Like, I kind of operated under the assumption for most of my life that at some point I would get to a point where I could play everything perfectly, and then I could really worry about the higher level musical things. And then I got to the point in grad school, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll get to that point someday, but it's not happening anytime soon. In the meantime, all my teachers are asking me to focus on these other things that I keep pushing off. And so I got to the point where I started to be able to look at a score and look at the music and understand and make choices and figure out what the composer might have been getting at. And I realized one day that when I was focused on those things and not just on trying to impress everybody with how cleanly I could play, performing did feel very different. And even my experience of nerves started to change. And so I'm kind of guessing in the back of my mind that maybe that's part of what you meant by that. But yeah, I wonder if you could elaborate on that and what that looks like in the practice room.
Yes. Can I answer the first part of your question first?
Yeah.
Right. What does it feel like? I mean, I love playing. I love the noise of the flute. I love sitting in the middle of an orchestra and being surrounded by that beautiful sort of envelope of that embrace of the sound there. I mean, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to me. And I love those moments when you can hear a pin drop in a concert hall, and you feel it. You feel everybody's listening. And I think those are the moments we live for, because it's so, there's so few experiences in our world where there's that collective shared experience now. And it's just such a beautiful way. Here you are in a room full of strangers, and you've felt this moment together. And it's all about connection. I mean, I feel so clear about that. My job is not just to play the flute well. It's to offer that connection, and with my colleagues, and together with my colleagues, and then with the audience. And that's what I live for. And I love that. And so when one can surrender to that, you do all the really hard graft. And now I get to the other part of your question. Ultimately, everything is about storytelling to me. I mean, I love the noise of the flute. I'm not really that interested in playing the flute really well. I mean, it's a means to an end. It's a means to tell a story and to share what it is, about. Everything we do is about being human, in the music. So always trying to characterize or what is happening dramatically right now, what is the atmosphere, what is the tone color. Those are the things that interest me, and it's the telling stories without words. I that's the only reason I do this. And then the practice part is just trying to remove all the obstacles, and really technique is just pure and simple. It's just physical coordination. What I love about the Alexander technique that I really learned from that is there doesn't need to be any crashing moral judgment. It's what I'm doing, efficient or inefficient. It's not like, oh, you idiot, why did you play that out of tune again? Oh, why can't you get that passage right? It's such a relief to take that awful moral judgment and just say, I just haven't found my coordination yet. What would help? How can I find my coordination? So I love to chunk on micro levels. Just okay, for wind players or flute players, what is the airspeed I need here? What is the angle of the air? So that note speaks with effortless effort. So I'm just trying to do away all the time in a way that, for me, the process of practice is just refining this kinesthetic map. What do I need? What do I not need? And so that it's really so trustworthy. Like, you know, physically exactly what you're doing. Your coordination is really smooth and efficient. And then that allows you to be spontaneous musically. That gives you the confidence. Here we come back to the confidence again. That allows the confidence to be able to take musical risks. Because your kinesthetic map. When I perform, I'm never trying to recreate anything. I'm never trying to recreate anything. It's always slightly different. And you never walk into the same river twice. I mean, the fundamentals are the same. You know, like if you're playing the beginning of Daphnis and Chloe, you need to lift the airstream up roughly this angle, and you need to step on the gas pedal to get up the hill. You know, those high notes are resistant. And how resistant, you know exactly how resistant they are, and you meet that not with tightness, but with just beautiful organization. You know, not too tight, not too loose, just what's required, and then you're free to enjoy making music. So I would say the bulk of my practice is just this kinesthetic map.
I wonder if you could just elaborate on what you mean by kinesthetic map.
Yeah, kinesthetic map is really everything to do with like how you're organizing yourself physically. The foundation of your kinesthetic map is like, okay, allow your feet to rest on the floor. You know, soften the tops of your feet. Relax your ankles. Let go of your calf muscles. Soften the knees. Make sure you're not gripping at the hips. Release your arms from your back, all the way to your fingertips. Release into length. Free the neck. Think up along the spine, you know, forward and up with the head. So crown of the head, like a tree in the forest looking for the light. You know, the crown of the head, sort of orienting towards the ceiling. Not pushing at all, but just orienting there, and then you feel like you have roots going down through your feet. So you have that stability of the skeleton first and foremost. And then just on the, like, keeping that awareness from head to toe, you know, then becoming more specific. So when I'm doing my warm-up or when I'm doing the chunking of excerpts, often for flute players, when you're playing fast, you're playing fast finger passages or fast articulation passages, your tone quality drops. So finding a reference, you know, maybe playing one beautiful long note at the top of the run, just there. Okay, then clocking, what is the airspeed? What is that spaciousness there in the jaw, in the mouth, with the embouchure? What kind of airspeed is that? And then just refusing to compromise that. So then you might do a little bit of the run slowly, or you maybe just do a few notes of the run, or even the top and the bottom of the run, just 2 long notes. But you play them with a glorious tone, and that kinesthetic map of like, there's the airstream, there's that spaciousness in the jaw, there's that not too tight, not too loose in the embouchure, connecting those 2 notes, and then you build your argument from there. You know, you fill in the run without compromising that. Or maybe there's a difficult finger passage where you're prone to sort of grasp the keys. Oh, that's a really difficult combination there, and you kind of grasp it, and your wrists become really tight, and you might be anticipating that difficult one, and so slightly falling off it that way. So maybe just isolating 2 notes and doing those with excellence, with 0 stress in the body. So another way of saying it, finding your kinesthetic map is sort of really noticing on a very detailed level, how am I moving? How am I moving my body moment to moment? And when things are not helpful, like if I'm grasping for that note and then pressing the keys, it's not going to make the note any more right if I press the key harder. In fact, it's obstructing my breathing. It's making my fingers more unwieldy. So can I take responsibility for myself and keep the wrists free and just maybe isolate, go for the jugular. Where is that? Where is it the most difficult there? And can I do the ironing and just see if I can execute that without that startle response in my physiology? So that's what I mean about doing the ironing. And and then, you bring that spacious ease from head to toe to the table, quiet mind. If you put the right ingredients, the cake will come out. It won't fail you, or the ship will come around, or fixed metaphors. It's just, that kind of detailed work where you don't get in a flap. You're not unrealistic. You're not, you don't have to be Heifetz. Most of us aren't. But I mean, somebody like Heifetz just built up incredible coordination. And that, I think that's something we can all do. It's not beyond us. And it's also sort of a mental discipline, because it's kind of humiliating in a way. It's like beginner's mind, okay, that leap is really not clean, because I'm anxious about it. I'm throwing myself at it, and what do you need? I need to move peacefully and not be pressing the keys hard. I need to keep my breathing spacious, keep everything free and fluid, so that I'm not getting tied in knots. And also, whatever you practice, you reinforce. So the last thing you want to do is keep throwing yourself at that difficult passage with tight hands and expecting a different result. You're only teaching yourself, A, to be anxious about it, and B, to be uncoordinated. Something I do a lot of as well, for the flute, we're always worried about running out of breath because you waste so much. It's like you need as much as a tuba player, really, because you lose half of it. And so for me, another way of refining kinesthetic map might be to, on a difficult excerpt, to play the first phrase and then just stop completely at the breath, and then take a wonderful, spacious, relaxed breath, and then continue, and then again at the next breath mark, so that I'm not training myself to have an anxious, stressful breath. I'm just cutting that habit. And then, so we're training in this way, and then building it up. Of course, you have to play it fast with peaceful breathing. But then I might just focus on one thing at a time. Once I've done that sort of preparatory work, okay, let me see if I can do three phrases and keep my poise and not lose it at the breath marks. Can I keep breathing efficiently and reflexively? I don't focus on anything else. I'm not trying to play it super musically. I'm not trying to do 6 million things at once. It's only the breathing. Can I focus on the breathing and take care of business with that? Like one thing at a time. So that way you build up your kinesthetic map. Just focus on one element of the coordination, and then you get that under your belt, and then you keep coming back to it and reinforcing it too. It's never just one and done. That's what helps you build your trust in yourself. And then when you've done that systematically, then you can juggle 6 balls in the air at once and cope with it and keep that peaceful body. So something I'm really, really interested in is this idea of the peaceful body, because I think to create any kind of art is to make yourself vulnerable and to put yourself out there and risk rejection, risk ridicule, risk whatever, risk indifference, and I have great respect for artists of any discipline. It takes a lot of courage. It's much easier not to. And so I think performers have the right to have a peaceful body, but nobody will give it to you. It's like something you have to claim for yourself. There's a beautiful quote by Pablo Casals: playing an instrument should increase a person's confidence in themselves, not increase their fear. But often the more advanced we get, the more our fear increases, perhaps because there's more to lose in a way, or higher pressure situations, bigger audiences, or more critical audience, who knows, whatever. But I think that's a mantra that we can live by. It's like we don't have to be diminished by these things. We don't have to contract. I remember when I was going through my tenure process in Pittsburgh, I had a little mantra: do not contract. Do not, mentally or physically, because you're being judged. The conductor will ask you to do this, do that, do this, do that. And it's like, is this okay? Is this okay? No, stay connected to your back, your stability, and what helps you play your best. Stay open. Because frankly, the other stuff doesn't help. So it's also just practical. I mean, this is such a beautiful, beautiful art form. It can change people's lives. It will never stop a tank. But nevertheless, people will sometimes remember performances throughout a lifetime. I'm 54 now. I remember performances in my 20s that I will never, ever forget, or where I was so moved listening to somebody play. And that's not nothing. Like, that's such a gift. And, I think it's not to be underestimated. And so Billie Jean King, the wonderful tennis player and advocate, she has this saying that pressure is a privilege. Sometimes you feel the pressure as a burden, but actually it's a privilege. How great to get the chance to play at that level or in Symphony Hall in Boston. What a beautiful privilege. What a maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to do that. It's so transient, it's so fleeting, but it's not nothing. I think it can help us to be kinder to ourselves. I've certainly felt pressure as a burden, and then you have to kind of talk yourself around. I remember when I was in Pittsburgh, Emanuel Axe came to play with the orchestra, and there was also a little chamber concert that he kindly agreed to play, and a few of us were lucky enough to play with him. So I got to play Gluck's Dance of the Blessed Spirits and also the beautiful Carmen entr'acte. And I remember practicing at home, just feeling thoroughly miserable. Oh, it's not good enough. And, you kind of do a number on yourself. And then I suddenly had this realization, Lorna, this may be the one and only time you get to play a piece with Emanuel Axe. Don't miss it with this nonsense. You can play Dance of the Blessed Spirits. You can play Carmen entr'acte. It's not beyond you. Just do your best. Practice well. Practice appropriately. And then show up. Just show up and get over yourself. And just, enjoy. And I think in our business, I know sometimes it's not helpful when people just say, just go and enjoy yourself. Just in a way, you need the equipping part as well, in order to be able to enjoy it. Because our nervous systems are also not nothing. I think when I was younger, I used to try and override my nervous system and just say, okay, look, Lorna, you're not at death's door. You're not living in a war zone. You can walk on stage and play this. Don't be so vain or. But now I have a little bit more respect for the nervous system. And then you bring the rational mind to the table as well. Of course, you're not in a war zone. There is no threat to your safety. The only threat is that you might humiliate yourself. You will survive that. You will live. It might not feel very good, but you'll be okay. You may have to choose another profession or leave the country, but you'll be okay, fundamentally. Nevertheless, the nervous system is registering a threat. You have to kind of befriend your nervous system and be your own best ally that way. So I think it's both and. So now I don't try and override my nerves or my nervous system. I try to work with it and just say, okay, Lorna, you're not, get a grip. You can do this. It's not beyond you, and you have the skills to do it. Nevertheless, can you take care of your nervous system by having a whole battery of things that help? So for me, it was like Alexander technique procedures like the semi-supine constructive rest, which helps you release your spine so that and for your neck, so you're more coordinated, your breathing is more coordinated. So that's how I would start off my practice. Having a really, really good warm-up routine where you're covering all the bases. So for us on the flute, that would be just, get command of your breathing, connect with your breath, like long oceanic breaths, and then bouncing breaths. It's like open strings, for a string player, or just connect with your breath, get the air moving through the flute, peacefully, calmly, nowhere to go, nothing to do, just resonate, get the breathing flowing. These kind of fundamentals, doing flexibility exercises, so that when you do your big leaps in deafness or whatever, it's not a mystery. You know where those notes live, and you're just in your warm-up, you're just reinforcing your kinesthetic map, so you can be peaceful and efficient and accurate and skillful. And you do finger dexterity, a little bit of dexterity. What else? Yeah, flexibility, articulation. So like a tennis player, you're practicing all the shots separately. You're practicing your serve, you're practicing your backhand, you're practicing your volley, so that you can play the game. You can play the ball wherever it lands on the court. That's sort of my approach to the warm-up. When I auditioned for Boston, I made a pact with myself. This feels very vulnerable, especially I was 52 at the time auditioning, that this later stage in life, to be putting yourself on the line again. And so I made this pact with myself that in my practice, whatever I do is going to be constructive. So whatever you repeat is with a clear intention, and what are you going to do differently, and how are you going to refine that kinesthetic map? What? So I'm really, really, really into this idea of practicing proactively, not reactively, not playing and then what goes wrong, but practicing in a way in order to go right. So a ton of chunking, a ton of breaking things down, and just putting them back together again with peaceful body, with really good coordination, with no stress. So it's like stress levels are really low, but attention is very high. So it's very different from reactive practicing, where it's like, why did that go wrong? And then you go back and try and fix it. And so it's a much more pleasant way to practice, and just trying to be really, really, really disciplined. Whatever you repeat, make it constructive. I don't know if this is helpful to share this, but I have a little notebook here that, when you have a big performance coming up, or I made this notebook when I auditioned for Boston. When I get nervous, I get a little bit spacey and dissociative. So I could just end up doing a warm-up, playing long notes till the cows come home. But I wrote down my whole warm-up, and I timed it. This will take me 45 minutes to do. And if I only have 20 minutes in a warm-up room, this is what I'm going to do. So it was all mapped out. So and sure enough, I did get very dissociative and spacey, and it was so helpful. Okay, just read the instructions. And it was something I relied on quite a lot. And then, waiting in the practice room, instead of testing yourself on the excerpts, that's a surefire way to make you doubt yourself. Because the minute something goes wrong, it brings some doubt in your mind. So I only did the excerpts really slowly, and just, again, to refine them, just to remember your coordination. And I wrote down maybe 3 things from each one. That, what's the challenge in this one? Okay, what do I need to remember about the kinesthetic map here? And then just isolate those chunks. Maybe play the whole thing slowly, leave it, next one. And then also have very clear idea what you're wanting to communicate with each one. So it was sort of a clear map physically, and also a clear intention, expressively. And then just trying to keep your nervous system very quiet. So centering exercises as you teach, Noah. And I had breathing exercises, just not to do with the flute, but to help me calm my nervous system. So I had a whole battery of things there that helped. You're taking responsibility for your whole self, and also taking care of your whole self, so that walking into this thing that can feel like walking through fire in a way, nobody likes being judged. it's very uncomfortable. I'm sure everybody feels when you're in the warm-up room, everybody else sounds magnificent behind closed doors, and you feel anxious, and then you feel, and I definitely felt this, like, get me out of here. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. Let me out of here. This is part of the equipping yourself, really having these strategies and tools. You're going to feel like that. So what helps you to stay present? What helps you to keep a peaceful body? What helps regulate your nervous system? What helps you stay open expressively? So in addition to those sort of nuts and bolts thing, I also had at the back of my book like some quotations that help me to remember. Like one of them is a beautiful Zen quote: "We move beyond notions of success and failure, praise and blame, fame and humiliation to try and create a work that is of benefit." Or I love literature, and so one of my favorite quotes is Toni Morrison: "Forget your name in the street, tell us what life has been for you in the dark places and the light." Those things really help me remember that's my job. When I'm in the audition, I'm playing Shostakovich 6, and it's this very, very lonely flute solo, or something as sweet and beautiful as the Carmen entr'acte, or as life-affirming as Brahms 1. That's Toni Morrison. Like, what has life been for you in the dark places and the light? And that's our job. We're artists. We're not just instrument operators. Those things help me stay centered. And also, you feel very alone in those situations when you're in the practice room, warm-up room, waiting to go on stage, and sort of in your mind's eye, calling up the people that have meant a lot to you. So I actually, to the Boston audition, in the back of my little notebook, I just had the names of some people that meant the world to me. Like my first flute teacher in Scotland, who made me just fall in love with the flute and fall in love with music. And every single time you played, you had to be telling a story. And then William Bennett, my teacher in London, again, like that was the worst crime if you were not saying something with the music. So just sort of summoning them up in your mind's eye. Okay, remember what you were taught. Remember, and also just in honor of them, carrying on that tradition. Or before the Boston audition, it was that audition was, I think, January 9th or something like that. And so I'd just been home in Scotland and with my family, with my aunts and cousins, and they're wonderful musicians. My uncle and cousin are guitarists, and they play mandolin, and they do a lot of folk music. And so we always would play after like the Christmas dinner, and it's so happy to make music in an environment like that. And I even played them a little bit of my Mozart that was coming up in the audition, and it was just so lovely. And it's just even in your mind's eye, imagining they're on the other side of the screen. Because I always find the screen a bit daunting, because I live for the communicative aspect of playing, and in a way, visually, that screen takes away that element of communication visually. But your intention has to be stronger than the screen, that you want to share something with the people behind the screen. And really, it's a difficult situation for everybody to be in, also for the jury to be in. It's really stressful. Having been on the other side of the screen now myself a lot, it's really stressful because you want to make sure you don't miss something, or you don't make a mistake, or you don't want to have conflicts with your colleagues if you have differences of opinion. It's really stressful. So sometimes I think it's helpful to bear that in mind when you're performing, that maybe, whether you win or lose. I mean, most auditions are going to lose. So it's quite helpful just to accept. and just, okay, I'm just going to offer what I can offer and let the chips fall. Maybe something you play will brighten somebody's day on the other side of the screen, or it might move them, or, then that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Anyway, this comes back to like all the possibilities have to be on the table. Most auditions you're not going to win. Just the law of averages. I mean, it's kind of stacked against us, isn't it? They can only give one place, and they have to choose who they feel fits that best. And it needn't necessarily be I think probably the best audition I've ever played, I was rejected. And that really hurts. It kind of stings because there's no hiding because you didn't play defensively. It's like I just really opened up and gave everything, and it couldn't have gone any better, and still it's rejected. And that can be quite painful. But it's all, you bring your rational mind to the table. They had to pick the right person for their section, and the person that they picked in that audition, somebody I respect enormously. You don't begrudge them anything, and at the same time, you don't do a number on yourself. I did everything I could, and some things we can't control. And then it was also here, it's another case where it was very helpful not to override your system. Like, in the same way as not overriding your nervous system here, not overriding your disappointment. It's okay to feel, it's okay. Human. It's okay to let that run its course, and then also for it not to diminish you. You know what I did after that one? I listened to some recordings of my old teacher, William Bennett. It reminded me why I love music and why I love the flute. And so sometimes when you're feeling disheartened, just turning towards what is precious to you, and then you don't get, you don't get depleted. And it's okay to be disappointed. My predecessor in Boston, Elizabeth Rowe, she wrote such a beautiful blog post right before the audition for Boston for her job. And she said, it's such a stressful environment. I mean, people are putting themselves through the fire taking this audition, and so much effort has gone into it. And, one person may be lucky enough to win the job, and just know that whether it goes your way or whether it doesn't go your way, it doesn't define you. I think that's so wise.
The last thing, if you have time for it, is if you only had 20 minutes to practice, what would you do with that 20 minutes?
Yeah. I have this exercise where I do singing and playing. And it's sort of just very, very oceanic type breaths. So it feels so good. And so you take these long inhalations with a peaceful body. And then as you breathe out through the flute, you also hum, you sing and play. So it kind of it wakes up all the resonance in the body, like the head resonance, like singers talk about the chest resonance. And you sort of feel the vibrations there. And it feels so beneficial. And then it sort of wakes up the instrument of your own body and puts you in sync with the actual instrument. And so I love doing that. And it feels so good. And it fundamentally connects you with your breath, and also the desire to communicate, because it's like, it's so vocal. It's less about the flute, it's more about the voice, and aligning your voice, aligning your breath with the task at hand. So, and it opens up your sound and your resonance, but also it kind of just, first things first, human expression and this processing in contact with this instrument. So that's what I would do.